Good morning, everyone. Again, we've had some great talks, and hopefully during lunch we can have some more chatting and getting to know each other better. But today we're talking about technology, and I think I just pushed this thing. Oh, there it is, Interpreting in Technology. That's the name of ours because we have some problems finding interpreters all the time. But why don't we just start, and we'd like to hear a little bit. You can imagine what kind of technology is out there already, but it's nice to see who actually uses it and hear how they use technology to solve language access problems. So let's just see what's happening. And we've asked Kleber back again, Kleber Palma again. If you don't know him, he's the director of the New York City Department of Education's Translation and Interpretation Unit. So I'm sure New York City is huge alone, but let's see what they're doing and hear what they're doing in terms of technology and interpreting.
Great, thank you, Sue. Good morning, everybody. So when I asked to speak on this panel, it really got me thinking in terms of what's new. And there could be a lot of new technologies, but I thought I'd focus more on something some of us may be exposed to, or some of us actually use, which is the over-the-phone interpretation service. How many of you have used it, know of it, want to use it? Show of hands.
What?
Okay. So the over-the-phone, just to give the 10-second background, and it's been touched on yesterday and today, enables you to get an interpreter over the phone rather quickly and rather easily, as opposed to scheduling someone to come in to your site on a specific day or time. And also allows you to use the interpreter for however long or short a time you want. Typically that comes with a toll-free number that you dial for one of these language service providers. And you go through a menu system where you simply identify yourself in terms of an access code or an ID code so that they know who you are, because that assumes that there's some sort of pre-established contract or business negotiation that happened before that, so that they expect your call and they expect the access code that you give them, and they say, sure, okay, we recognize your code, what language do you want? And you say language X, and the interpreter is on the line within a minute or two, which is fantastic. So that's the service. It works in many instances to overcome language barriers. It's not for everything. It won't work for everything, but it does address the unexpected visits, the unexpected phone calls, either incoming or outgoing. We've been using the service for some time now, and originally at the New York City Department of Education, we had asked all of our client schools to contact my office so that we can funnel those calls to one of the language service providers. So we would market to the schools our telephone number. And so then the reasoning behind funneling all these calls to my office was to keep tabs on the usage, on the volume, who's calling. But it came to a point where that volume was more than what we expected. And the unit is not a telephone hub center or operations center, simply a translation office. So my staff was no longer able to take in the large volume of calls coming from the schools. And we were more of a barrier than anything else in getting the service to the school or the parent at that given moment, because the calls would come in, it would tie up our lines. We'd then funnel the call to Language Line Services, which is our contract provider. And we weren't really adding much to that process. We were actually slowing things down. So what we did with Language Line, and this is the piece where I want you to think about whether it applies to you or your organization, is that actually Language Line does a very good job in detailing, because I pay the invoices and they're big numbers, so I see on the invoices the details in terms of the number of calls that they take within a month, the length of the calls, how many minutes, the languages requested, even the date and time. Everything is on the invoice, which is fantastic. So we approached them to see whether or not we could add in the menu system when you call them, not only an access code, but some sort of ID code that would enable us to identify who's actually calling for the service. And so I mentioned, the big number, 1,800 schools yesterday. And so so each school has a unique ID number already given to them. So we were able to connect and work with Language Line to add another prompt in their menu system. So now the system is when you call the toll-free number, which is dedicated to only the New York City public school system. You enter your access code, and the next question is, what is your school ID number? Just to keep it simple. And so the school ID number is known by those who work at the school. So the second they punch in that code for that ID for that school, it gives them the access that they need to get the interpreters right away. And at the end of the month, when I get the invoice, it tells me which school is asking for which languages and how often the service is being used. And it gave us tons of information. So the background on that is just Giving Language Line is a spreadsheet of all the schools, all the codes. They put it into their system. They set it up for us. And it's been great because not only are schools directly able to access the service, so the translation universality equation, which is one of the things we really wanted to resolve. They get quicker service, quicker access to interpreters. But the other benefit was that we're now able to see who's using the service and how much, which is great, and who's not using the service and why they are not. We can take a look at a school that has a very high LEP population based on other data we have, and I can take a look at the language line data and say, how come you haven't used them at all? You have 50% LEP population, you have 50 languages in your school, and you didn't dial them once. You're not, and that goes on, and then it shows what their parental engagement efforts are, and then they get into trouble for other reasons. But the idea there is that it gives us a lot more information, and we've come to learn what languages are I think yesterday are the most used or are in contact or you come across, I think was the verbiage that was used yesterday, as opposed to your top standard languages based on home language or preferential data. It's interesting to see that actually what's actually being used, and that information, that data, those invoices that I see have given us a lot of information. So all that to say that if you do use a over-the-phone interpretation provider, and if you do have either multiple sites throughout the islands or multiple offices within your agency, or multiple people that may use the service. And if you ever wanted to take a look at, trends, length of call, who's using it, who's not using it, and in terms of languages being requested, maybe there's a possibility for you to work with your provider to see whether or not they can simply add a prompt in their menu system. It's a simple thing to do, and it's valuable in terms of data. So we're able to take a look at that now, which is great. So that's the only thing I had to share. I mean, that's something that we were really excited about. Oh, well, I guess let me conclude by saying that since we gave schools direct access, which started back in January, so from January to June, we took a snapshot of usage compared to the previous year. Usage increased about 80% compared to last year. And it talks to how we as the unit were just more of a barrier than anything else, than a facilitator. But it also helped to promote and to tell schools, oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention this. I should have read my notes. The other thing that the unit was impeding in terms of providing the service is that we would be able to help schools back in the day, but only from 8 to 5, because that's the only times that we were open and someone was actually at a phone in the office. But now giving schools direct access with the coding system that I mentioned and access 24/7, it makes a lot more sense, because a lot of schools, a lot of these school-based employees or teachers who want to communicate with parents after hours, because that's when parents are home after hours, they're able to do so after 5 p.m. And so we've also seen a spike in usage after hours, which is great. We want the service to be used, and we want parents to be informed, and we want to give the resources to our schools to be able to do so. So that's what we've accomplished, and we're really excited in the increase in usage, and we're only going to see it go up and up as the service is more widespread throughout our school system. So that's it.
Thank you. And I just have a few questions.
Sure.
Maybe you can help clarify. Could you help clarify what type of, once again, what type of meetings or what kind of things are being used? Are telephone interpreting being used in the school system? So
primarily, they're for outgoing. So outgoing phone calls are what we describe as anybody at the school making a call to a household, and primarily it's regarding student safety, student attendance, health issues. Your son is sick, come pick up your child, nurse's office. A lot of outgoing phone calls. So we through our training, we want to make sure school staff know where to look for in terms of language preference before they make that phone call. And if they know the household and they know the phone number or the cell phone number of the parent, next to that information, they should also know that the parent's preferred language is Korean, for example. So then beforehand, they can use the service, get the interpreter, and together with the Korean interpreter, make the outgoing phone call. And then the other piece of it that's used a lot is those unexpected visits from parents. You never know when they're going to show up. Before school, after school, during their lunch hour, they have a question, they want information. And if someone walks into a front desk of a school, we want to make sure that that front desk personnel knows, first of all, that they have a language ID guide visible so that someone can point to the language, but also that they know what number to access and how to access the services as well. We encourage also the over-the-phone piece to be used for smaller sessions and smaller meetings, one-on-one sessions, maybe a parent-teacher conference. It wouldn't work, obviously, for an audience like this, right? So we want to identify the types of meetings that potentially it can be used for. And those meetings can be 45, 60, 90 minutes long, and that's perfectly fine to use the service for that long as well.
Mm-hmm. And so things such as the individual and IEP meetings where you have a number of people in the room talking about their child, maybe with special needs, would you encourage them to use face-to-face because of the simultaneous piece, or
Absolutely, yeah. The first option there would be face-to-face because of the number of people in the room. But in some cases, in some cases, there is no choice but to use the over-the-phone piece. Because that's better than not having anybody there at all. And so the issue with the over-the-phone piece, though, there are some difficulties. It's difficult to hear who's speaking at what time. Sometimes there's multiple voices going on, and having an interpreter on a speakerphone could be difficult for that type of setting. Also, there's no visuals. Sometimes you need to read body language, so we're looking into video conferencing down the road a little bit, so that helps with that piece. But we also make sure that the interpreters that work for this language services provider, that we give them glossaries beforehand, so that they make sure that they have the terminology down as well, so that they have, if it's an IEP, they have special education terminology down, medical conditions and so forth. So we give them the resources they need to perform their task.
Okay, very good. Yeah, because it could be really tough if it's going fast. A lot of people speaking at the same time. So perhaps there's a future in training teachers when to call, or you already have a list of things that you suggest them to use face-to-face, or
Yeah, best practices. So we do a lot of training, and we talk about what do schools usually use the service for, what we recommend, what we suggest. And some will be adamant about it's great, it works every time, and others maybe it doesn't work, it's horrible because. Bad. And the other thing is sometimes some schools have, in the city of New York, there's just bad reception in some areas. Or the meeting may be held in a gym or in a basement or somewhere where there isn't any reception, so that can be an issue as well.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Okay, now we're going to move on to, and we'll let you all have time for questions, because I think we will have time. Cari Uesugi, I guess it is, I can never say that word, actually flew over here from Maui, so she's our other island representative, one of them. And she was a social worker for over 30 years, so this is close to her heart. She was patient relations and advocate at Queens for a number of years, and then she went on to Maui Memorial Medical Center, where she is now, and she helped establish their language access plan over there. So she's been struggling with language access, especially where to get interpreters and things like that. So we really want to hear what they're doing over there, because I know they use technology as well.
Hi, welcome everybody. Do I have go?
It should be on, but yeah.
Okay, let me know if you can't hear, because I do tend to talk soft. What I want to do first, before going into the technology part, is to give you a little background about Maui Memorial, or the island of Maui.
Yeah, closer, yeah.
Really?
It's got to be really loud.
Okay. Let me know if you guys can't hear. Well, Maui Memorial currently is the only hospital on Maui, and we're located in central Maui. We have about 213 beds at this time. Also, it employs about 1,400 staff. One of the things about Maui Memorial is that it is under the Hawaii Health Systems Corporation, and so we do have unique challenges, I guess, from Honolulu. So we are different. Last year we had 45,000 ED visits, emergency visits. We had over 1,400 admissions. So you can see the traffic that goes in and out, right? We have a diverse demographics, not only with the people living there, but we also get cruise ships that come in every week, big cruise ships. And so the languages, you can see our challenges of the different types of languages that we do have. So kind of moving forward, when I started with Maui Memorial about 3 to 4 years ago, there were no qualified interpreters. Wrap that around your head. And so there were interpreters. I'm not saying there weren't interpreters, but there were, right? And family and friends and everybody else who wanted to do interpreting. So when coming from Queens, I knew about qualified interpreters. And so the question was, where are they, you know? And we're talking about face-to-face. We're not talking about language line, face-to-face people. And so looking at that, knowing the resources and what was there, what wasn't there, it was, okay, Maui's small, let's collaborate. Just with Melody, you were saying, right? There's so many people who have the same, you know, concerns and same interests. Let's get everybody together. And so we did. We got Maui College, workforce, the financial part. To me, it was almost like starting like a university, right? You need the people to teach it, but then you also have to have people affording the classes. So how can that be? So looking at that financial piece too. So when we talk to the community, when we talk to staff, where are you going to get the classes and how are you going to afford to pay it? So we did. We all collaborated together and we formed a class at University of Hawaii, the Maui College. And so we had a couple of classes. So we did have a growing number of interpreters. But what we were looking for was a little bit more. And that's where the Center of Interpretation Translation Studies came in, Sue. So she is now doing a class, continuing class on medical interpreting, but she's doing it on video, right? So the media, so that people on Maui and the other islands can participate if they want to, which is great because we want to keep that growing too. So that's one piece about growing and having more face-to-face people or meeting that need besides the telephonic. That's one piece. We needed more. We needed more options. You know, talking to OCR and talking to other, you know, facilities. What else is that other piece? And it was the remote. It was a remote viewing, right? So the video remote. So how many of you, by raise of hand, know what video remote is? And this is what I tell the new staff. Come on, this is an important question. And the reason is, and why it's important, it's just another technology that we can use, another option, right? It's not all and you know, that this is where we're gonna go. It's another option. And like everybody was saying, what is appropriate? What is timely? So for us at Maui Memorial, it was scary. The staff, you have the staff that have been there a long time. It's scary. A lot of people don't want to use computer systems, and I don't know how to use it, you know. When we had cheat sheets, you know, Melody was talking about cheat sheets, we had that. But training in this area is so important because it's so new. We got a lot of young people here, but remember, some of us remembered only landlines? And then they got these big dudes coming out, you know, the cell phones, and it was like, no, it's too expensive, and, you know, I don't know how to use it. But I bet everybody here, you know, has a cell phone now, right? And it's just, that's the way technology is going. But it's not end all, right? So looking at the, you know, video remote, it's where could Maui Memorial use it? We don't want to negate or not use the face-to-face because it's very important. So what we did was we got together and we met, and the best place that we found it was emergent care. So I don't know all where you folks are from, but if you're with public safety or, right, school systems, when somebody just drops in or something like that really quick, and you can't get that interpreter, that face-to-face interpreter right away, that's where we found the video remote to be used. So if somebody comes in trauma or ambulance or something that just, you need somebody right there, we will get the video remote, equipment, we will get it there, but at the same time, we're calling face-to-face, right? Or we're calling, the different organizations to help listen and interpreting. So we found that, hand in hand, using what resources we have and the more options, and I think that's the key, is to really look at what you need, what your demographics are, and then trying to fit in what resources would be the most appropriate for that. Maui, we are so challenged in that, yes, we have 2 sign language interpreters, 2. And we have, a growing number of face-to-face, I want to say growing number of face-to-face. We do have video remote, and, so trying to look at that, and technology can be your best friend, but in regards to having technology, education is the key. Like our staff, we have to have constant education about when to use it. Don't only rely on the video remote. Don't only rely on face-to-face. Guys, you got to know all of it and how to contact. And it's constant education. Melody was saying education is the key, and it is, because some people aren't going to get it. So you got to keep going back. And didn't I tell you this before? But it's like going back and seeing where these people need to get service, in services. So that's one, staff training. Another thing for us was IT support. Guys, you need IT support for this, because if things have glitches, and that's one of the things OCR was saying in regard to video remote, it's a new thing. But if there's glitches, if Wi-Fi, like you were saying, Kleber, if there's some areas that, in the hospital, so we just had an area where they were going to do an MRI and, they couldn't catch it. Well, this should have been noticed way before that. The manager should have gone around with the video to see where it's not going to catch, right? And IT needs to get on it. And if it needs to be service, it needs to be services. If the interpreters aren't good in interpreting, then we need to get back to that company to let them know. So there's a lot of support it's a new way to go, but again, in certain circumstances, we're going to need, it's in the health field, we're going to need to use that. So in conclusion, the bottom line is doing what's right, like everybody said, and giving meaningful access to provide these services to our patient and family members. And I also include visitors, who come to our facilities, or people that are just walking around. Maui Memorial is a really nice hospital, and sometimes people come to just walk around. I don't know why, but they do. And some people, I think tourists, I guess, but they come, and then we had to have an interpreter. And we did have a case just recently, so interesting. Someone needed Hawaiian Sign Language. Have you guys read about that lately? Right? It's like there's not that many people that do that. And the person who was able to do it needed also a sign language interpreter. So there was the patient, the Hawaiian Sign Language, thank you, Melody, she helped us with that. That's networking. And then we had to have a sign language interpreter to interpret her to get to the physician. So wrap that. So do you see, guys, it's just using what you have, expanding, and not being afraid to say, hey, Melody, I'm stuck. Hey, Sue. Sue said, call Melody, and it was using all of your networks. So guys, pass around your business cards today and really, really network, see who's in the same area that you're in. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a few comments, because I know you're working in a hospital. You talked about reception, and that is a big issue. I know I was in. I know sometimes they break down. The machines break down and things like that. But I know, like Queens West has told me, Queens Medical Center in West, they say we don't get reception. We don't even have telephone services, let alone video. So that's and a lot of their facilities just don't have it. They're not equipped. So while they're building it, of course, here on Maui, we have a lot of face-to-face interpreters. Here on Oahu, have a lot of face-to-face interpreters. But I think one issue is on Maui, as you're building the pool, and I know I've been involved in doing a lot of training and things like that, but just on Maui, the problem is people have full-time jobs because they're not full-time interpreters. There's just not enough jobs to go around. And so I know, like on Oahu, you can be a full-time interpreter if your language is one that is needed in the community, especially if you diversify. But the problem is, on Maui and other islands, it's hard to make a living. You cannot make a living as a full-time interpreter, so they have other jobs if they need to. So we need time to get a face-to-face interpreter, just to help them get off of work. That means you're going to have to make the pay good enough for them to want to get off of work to come and help with a face-to-face. But I have a question for interpreters. How many have done over the phone at one point or another? Interpreters that are in the room. Okay, how many of you you think you really like it? Okay, one or two. And this doesn't include sign. And how many don't really like it for one reason or another? It's hard. Okay, only one of you. Okay, the rest of you are either not being honest or I'm talking only telephone. Only telephone. Okay, yes, thank you. Most interpreters, have a frustration with it because you can't see what's happening, obviously. So it's frustrating I would say the majority of interpreters I talk to, it can be quite frustrating. The only time it's not is when it's all set in. Let me show you some slides. I just made some pictures here. Hopefully this thing will work. This is like a telephonic interpreter sitting there with either something over their ears. It's hard to hold a telephone and take notes at the same time. So that is a problem, and so it's nice to be able to sit at a desk. Oftentimes they'll call the only certain language on the island and say, can you interpret? And if they say, hold on, I'm driving, no, thank you, we don't want you if you're driving, because now with cell phones it's easier to find over-the-phone interpreters, but but those experienced know that they still have to take notes. I watched an interpreter who I happened to see, a very good interpreter, a Cantonese, and she was doing over the phone with a hospital, and it was an ER situation, so she was taking notes and interpreting and taking notes. And the patient was amazing because she had all kinds of heart problems, and she had stents put in, and she was saying in Chinese everything that she had been done. And this interpreter was taking really good notes. And then she interpreted everything. And then it was over. She crumpled up her paper, threw it in the trash can. And then 5 minutes later, she got a phone call, and now it was the doctor, not the nurse, but the doctor saying, could you tell me what she just said, that all the stuff she had to, hold on, please. She ran over to the trash can, pulled out her notes, crinkled paper, undid all of her crinkled paper, and she sight translated all of her notes, just a whole page of notes of all this medical terminology. And so I was really amazed because of the type of interpreter that she was. She could be really, really accurate. But anyway, I don't know why I said that. Okay, let's go to the next one. Because note-taking is really important, even over the phone. Okay, so you can still be pretty accurate over the phone. Now, the problem is you can't see. And many of us have done over the phone, and they're talking, and you're confused. Excuse me, is that somebody else in the room, or are you talking to the interpreter, or And then of course another problem is training people how to use over the phone. Because I know, we do a lot for hospitals in the middle of the night or something. I get calls, and they say, "Could you tell the patient this and that and this?" And I'm like, "You just tell them, I'll interpret." But they always say, "You tell the patient this." Anyway, it's really hard. Another thing about telephone interpreters is some people expect the interpreter interpreter to do the telephone conversation, and that's something we want to get away from. For example, if you're at a housing or whatever, wherever you are, a DHS meeting, and the person doesn't show up, we encourage interpreters to say, "Oh, would you like to call the interpreter, and I can interpret for you over the phone?" Instead of saying, you know, interpreter, could you call the client or the patient or something and find out where they are? Well, the problem is the HIPAA laws we're not sure of. And so if you're asking us, for example, the confidentiality, if you're asking interpreters to call a patient at home and remind them that they have some kind of appointment or something like that, that's not the best, because what will happen is an interpreter will say, "Hi, is Miss Lee there?" And they're saying, "No." "Okay, could you tell her she has a cancer, you know, at the cancer center, she has an appointment tomorrow." "What? She has cancer?" "Oh, well, yeah, but aren't you relative? Yeah, can you just tell her that she has..." Do you see the problem? It's just a problem because interpreters don't understand how far to take that confidentiality. So it's not fair, I think, to have the interpreters be the one to call. I think it should be the agency calls, and you can call and get an interpreter on the line to make that phone call like they do in New York. I think it's much fair, and you can charge for it, even if it's only a 5-minute phone call. You can charge 5 minutes for that call or something. So anyway, that's a telephone call. The other one is, this is sometimes how it looks like when they have a double phone, that they're both listening at the same time. Now, as yesterday, some of you were here and you heard the testimony of how the patient had a stroke. She couldn't turn her head to see the screen on the video remote system. So it probably would have been better to pick up the phone if they had a telephone and put it in her ear so that that they could hear. So this is just an example of a kind of telephone that you can buy that has 2 receivers to it. And then, of course, a lot just use the speakerphone because they want the provider to speak directly to the client or the patient while the interpreter interprets. So speakerphone is always, or a dual system like this. This is a sample of a remote video remotes interpreting, and we know a lot of ASL or sign language interpreters use this because it's hard to do over the phone, right? I mean, they need to see the signing, and so I think they have a much better, probably a very advanced system, but a lot of them have it at home, and they just have something in their home that they can use, whether it be the computer or something. And then you can see, like in the hospital, a lot of it, they have wheels, so you can wheel it around. And yesterday we heard the one going through physical therapy saying it was hard to maneuver the wheels, you know, turning here and there to try to, every time he said, you know, move here, sit here, raise your foot, it was very difficult for, to do the system. But at least it is on wheels, so it helps a lot. And then this is a different kind of video remote system where you can just pull it right up to the bed. But then again, they have to turn and look at it. But I think the good thing about this is at least the interpreter can see what's happening. And as long as the interpreter can see what happens, it really helps interpreters become accurate. And then one of these kinds of systems, oh, there's another one, you know, doing, and the interpreter can see which tooth is, no, I don't know. No, I don't. But anyway, you can see how the interpreter at least can see what's happening. And I think it's almost more important for the interpreter to see more than the patient or a client to see. And then this is just something using Skype. For like attorney-client, this is something that happened on the mainland, and I took a picture of this. I thought that was fun. And we know that in the hospitals, at least, you need to worry about the confidentiality laws. It's much stricter in the medical field with patient private information. But something like attorneys or something that's an open court, it doesn't really matter. So you can even use Skype with a home computer, such as they're doing, and a headset just helps with hearing. And something like this is working. And this happens to be a Chookies who wanted to borrow my computer because he had an appointment. And I'm like, you what? What is this? What? And so I said, well, we could try it. And so it was kind of fun. They were helping somebody in Wyoming or something like that who needed a Micronesian language interpreter. So you can do that as well. You can also now on your phones, you can do Skype, but you really want to think about what's behind you. You don't want some bright window behind you, so technology is important. And this is somebody using this. I borrowed this from her. This is a sample of a new kind of system. And up here, I don't know if you can see this, but up here is where the camera is. So you can see yourself in the corner, and then you can see something here. And this is portable, so you can kind of carry it around. And so this is kind of nice for the interpreter to use. If they can't hear, they can pick this up. They can attach a earphone to it or something. So this is an example of a Cisco system that uses this you can move around this so that they can see you well. Yeah. So, but there's a lot out there. There's a lot of companies that sell these things. There's, again, better and better equipment coming out more and more. So why not look into it? Again, I advocate myself face-to-face is the best because sometimes an interpreter has to do simultaneous. Give you an example. If you're sitting in for example, just yesterday when they were sharing, if the doctor starts talking to the English-speaking daughter, well, who is going to be interpreting that? And especially in an emergency situation. If you're using a video or a phone, who are they interpreting for? So an interpreter may have to rush over to the patient who's laying down and whisper into their ear, or over to the father who doesn't speak English and whisper in their ear and start doing simultaneous. So having a face-to-face interpreter in those kinds of situations, they can reposition themselves all over the room and do simultaneous. Or like we were talking about the IEP meeting, if the counselor starts talking and then the vice principal starts talking and then they start talking really quick, you can be sitting there doing simultaneous whispering simultaneous into the ear of the client or the parent who's sitting there. And just like in the courtroom, we do a lot of simultaneous. But if there is no one, you have to do consecutive, and you have to use, like the telephone, which at least it's there. Thank you. And so the last thing is there's just so many different situations. But in immigration court here in Hawaii, I know that they're also in charge of Guam, for example, and the Guam immigration court has, the attorney sitting there, their client, which is the respondent sitting next to them, and then a big camera, and it doesn't move. They just sit there. So it's easy to do something like that, where the interpreter here in Hawaii would see it on a big TV screen. And then the camera would be on top of the TV screen and everyone can be seen. They do that as well in like the defense office of public defender for the federal court. So that works really, really well, a video system such as that doesn't break down. So very good. I think we're ready for questions. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all our panelists on this. Okay, so just a few questions. Well, first, one correction I have here for Sue. It says here
Oh, and before you ask the question, can I just tell you, I forgot I had one last slide. And this is a system that the courts bought that is actually portable. And this one on the ground, you can see a wireless transmitter. It's like a little radio. And all of the others have a little earphone you stick on, and that's a simultaneous system that somewhere like the driver's education, where they have only a few people who speak the non-English language and everyone else is speaking English. So in a training situation, this kind of equipment is great because the interpreter can sit anywhere and you can have 10 people listening at the same time to the interpreting. So something like the PAC, the parents and children together, or somewhere they have training for anger management classes, you can consider maybe renting this from some agency, a language agency, and maybe later on purchasing it yourself. So I just wanted to show that option as well. Thank you. And you have that at the DOE. This is the simultaneous interpreting equipment, and this one happens to be wireless. It's a wireless transmitter.
Is that through language line?
Okay. Okay, thanks. It's great just to hear about all these technological advancements, and it's just only going to get better, it seems. I mean, you think about where we were 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So appreciate all this information. So I